From 2010 to almost 2018, World of Warcraft was basically my entire gaming life. It wasn't just a game, it was a place where I hung out with my dad, my friends, my dad's friends. It felt like a second home. And now, I can't even really force myself to log in anymore. Not because I think I grew out of it. I used to think this, but we'll discuss later in the video why I don't think this is the case. But in general, something about WoW and honestly all MMORPGs as a whole completely changed, and I don't think it's ever coming back. My dad started playing World of Warcraft back in 2009 with some friends from work, and for a while I've just sit there watching over his shoulder as he played, completely mesmerized by the bright colors of Elwyn Forest and watching him ride the tram in Stormwind, and it was just, I was hooked. That was it. That's all I needed. You know, looking back at the billing history, my account actually started in early 2010, so right in the middle, I shouldn't say middle, near the end of Wrath of the Lich King for sure. My dad and his friends were Alliance, so of course that meant I started as Alliance too. I still remember starting out in Elwyn Forest as a mage and being completely blown away by how peaceful everything was and the music, discovering Goldshire Inn. It felt new, but weirdly familiar, like I had been here before. And then there was starting my Night Elf Hunter and questing in Darkshore, the old version before Cataclysm. It felt empty, almost lifeless in a way, but it had this atmosphere that I can't really explain. It just felt like a real place. And that's the thing about early WoW, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like an entire giant world that was begging for you to explore it. Around the same time, my best friend happened to also play WoW. And this is my best friend to this day, so we still talk about World of Warcraft quite often. You know, we had so many sleepovers where we would take caffeine pills and just stay up all night on expansion launches, especially early on when we were playing with my dad and his friends, running dungeons, messing around, trying to pug Ice Crown Citadel, trying to get that final Lich King kill before Cataclysm came out, which was a huge deal, but of course we never made it, but, you know, it was still so much fun trying to do this. You know, it felt like we had our own little community in late Wrath, but then Cataclysm happened. And then Cataclysm happened. You know, I was insanely hyped for it. I even remember my dad letting me stay home from school just to play on launch day. I made a Worgen warrior named Worgen War. I know, creative. I was 15, cut me some slack. Yeah, at first I thought Cataclysm was awesome. It was my first expansion launch, so I never experienced it before. And on top of that, we got all new revamped zones. You know, I went from the old Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor to the new one. And it was cool. It was all new. But one thing that was happening was my dad's friends just stopped playing. One by one, they disappeared. Some said the game got too easy. Some didn't like the difficulty spikes in the heroics when the expansion first came out. Others felt like they had just already done everything, especially since Arthas was gone. And that last part I think actually matters a lot, because Arthas was seen as the villain, and we already beat him. Looking back, it kind of feels like Blizzard played their biggest card way too early, but for me, the biggest change wasn't even really the story. You know, I was too young at the time to even really understand it yet, but for me, it was the people. You know, WoW without that group just didn't feel the same anymore. I played with my dad here and there, but he had different objectives in the game than I did. My dad just wanted to make as much gold as he could, which to his credit, he really did accomplish. He was basically a WoW millionaire. And my best friend at the time was going through personal issues, so he couldn't play as much as I could. So I was doing Cataclysm a lot on my own, pugging on my own, and it just didn't feel as good as it did in Wrath of the Lich King. On top of that, Cataclysm just had a ton of issues with balancing, and you know, it was really hard as a casual, younger player to get things done, because this expansion felt like the first one that really catered to the hardcore players and really tried to increase difficulty on everything. So yeah, this is the point where WoW started to fade, but I was still playing it pretty much every day, and this was still my main game regardless. As for the end of Cataclysm, we had the final Dragon Soul raid, which is to this day looked at as a pretty mediocre raid, and it was looked at it back then too. I think the biggest problem was the Deathwing fight was very underwhelming. You're essentially polishing his toenails to death. But yeah, we had Dragon Soul for quite a while, and then Blizzard announced Mist of Pandaria, which at the time felt really weird. This was the first time that Blizzard was taking a massive risk with World of Warcraft. I mean, let's look at what was shown off here. Pandas, no clear antagonist for the first time in a WoW expansion. You know, I didn't really get it back then, but looking back now, I kind of appreciate what they were trying to do. They were trying to expand the world. You know, they were trying to do something a little different. They wanted to create new characters and try to incorporate some of the older lore back into the game and not just Warcraft 3 lore, essentially. At the time, though, the launch of Mists of Pandaria didn't really hold my attention. I would come back, leave, come back. I never quit the game for a super long period of time, but I remember particularly the launch of Mists of Pandaria being very grindy. For those who weren't there at the time, you had to grind dailies quite a bit to get decent gear if you wanted to raid, and it just wasn't my style. I wasn't really a big fan of doing dailies. So I left for the first few months. I came back for the Thunder Island patch, which held me for a little bit, and then I would leave again. And then I came back for the Timeless Isle because my best friend was consistently playing at the time, so I was able to play Timeless Isle with him. I was able to do Siege of Orgrimmar raids with him, and he was really good at the game, and he was a raid leader as young as he was. So he was leading his guild in Siege of Orgrimmar, and I was able to tag along as a little pally healer, and it was really fun. I think the biggest problem with Siege of Orgrimmar is it just obviously lasted a very long time. It was a massive content drought. I actually think it was the longest one up until that point. So yeah, I have mixed feelings with Mists of Pandaria, but I do appreciate what it was trying to do. So in late 2014, we got Warlords of Draenor, and honestly, the launch of this expansion has some of my favorite WoW memories ever. Everything about it at the time felt right. The questing and leveling up was just amazing. It was fast. It didn't feel like a slog like in previous expansions. So I actually enjoyed leveling up alts. The dungeons were really cool at launch. The class changes at the time felt welcome. It felt like Warcraft again, honestly. And then Blizzard just kind of stopped. We had our first 2 raids with Highmaul in Blackrock Foundry, which were amazing raids. I actually remember plugging them. I was so excited to play them. But if you look, Blizzard did cut a Shadowlands raid out, which that was meant to be its own raid patch, which would have been excellent in my opinion. Instead, we got what was essentially a mini patch that introduced stupid things like a selfie camera, and we had a docking yard with the garrison feature that was essentially just like a mobile game extension. And yeah, I mean, we kind of just rushed to the end with Hellfire Citadel, and I don't know, this is the expansion that Blizzard just kind of gave up on. And this, if you remember, if you were there, this was the first time that I think people really started to lose their trust in Blizzard. You know, Mists of Pandaria at the time was looked at negatively, and people really were in a rush to get out of it. But that was just really due to the content drought at the end. Like, Mists of Pandaria it was a solid expansion. There was no reason there for us to distrust Blizzard until now. Blizzard had never just downright cut half of the expansion out, but still charged us full price for it. So yeah, at this point, Blizzard really needed to pull a miracle to get everyone's trust back. And they kind of did with the next expansion announcement.
Most desperate hour, we must wield the power of the enemy.
So in 2015, Blizzard essentially announced the Break Glass in Case of Emergency expansion in the form of Legion. It didn't even feel real when it was announced, honestly. I don't think anyone was expecting this. I do think we were expecting a Burning Legion themed expansion, but not to the extent of what we got. I mean, the Demon Hunter class was insane at the time. There was never a new class introduced that cool. The return of Illidan, like, seriously, like that would basically be like bringing back Arthas. Illidan was the prime antagonist of the Burning Crusade expansion. He was many people's favorite character. To this day, he's still many people's favorite character. And I bought into the hype completely. I played everything. I leveled up every class, got every artifact skin that I could get, and it was great. I really loved Legion. Legion felt like it injected class identity back into the game, which was something that was missing for such a long time, because Blizzard really homogenized the classes up until then. I mean, all casters basically played the same, all melee played the same, so it felt good to like give classes their own identity again. Having said all this though, with everything great about Legion, it introduced things into the game that over the long term caused a lot of damage. Specifically, I am talking about the idea of borrowed power systems. The idea that you grind up all this power just to lose it in the next expansion or patch. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal because Legion was themed around such an amazing plot element with the Burning Legion that I don't think any of us really noticed how bad this could end up. But looking back, that was sort of the turning point. And even, you know, during then, I do remember complaints about how grindy the artifact system felt, but again, I mean, the theming around it was so cool that I didn't even care. I loved doing the secret artifact skin hunting, especially with the Paladin. The secret Ashbringer skin was such a fun quest chain. It really felt like playing an old school MMORPG again, being able to do this bonus stuff that, sure, it was only cosmetic, but it felt like progression, which was cool. It was something to do other than just raiding, which at the time, I mean, raiding was at this point becoming the only thing Blizzard seemingly cared about. In Battle for Azeroth, Blizzard doubled down on those borrowed power systems. This time, though, they didn't have the same level of excitement or payoff. The gear wasn't interesting as artifact weapons were. The story felt all over the place. This started out as an expansion where Sylvanas was seemingly being built as the bad guy, but we ended up fighting Azara and fighting Enzoth at the end. So, I don't know. Why they didn't just theme this as a void expansion to begin with, I don't understand. But yeah, I mean, BFA was sort of like Mist of Pandaria for me. I came back off and on. You know, I enjoyed the Mechagon patch. I enjoyed the Najatar patch. That was pretty fun. But I don't know, I never really felt a level of attachment to BFA because I just don't think this expansion had rewarding content. You know, a lot of the gear was very samey looking. They got rid of tier sets this expansion, which to this day, I don't understand why they did that. Tier sets are such an important part of World of Warcraft. That was just kind of mind-blowing to me. That's one of the reasons when I do transmog runs, when I come back to WoW, I never touch this expansion. But yeah, I mean, I just really was trying to care, but I just couldn't. And, you know, I tried coming back at the last patch, and I remember getting flamed in a battleground for not having some quote-unquote required legendary cloak, and that was it for me. I logged off. The idea of requiring a legendary cloak to do like baseline casual play was so absurd on the face of it to me, and it still is to this day, that I just couldn't take the game seriously to that point. So yeah, I did not touch BFA for the rest of its life, and I was pretty done with Blizzard until they announced something very interesting. So in 2019, Classic WoW came out, and suddenly it all made sense again. It wasn't me who changed, it was the game. I immediately fell in love with World of Warcraft again. The world felt bigger. Progression actually mattered. Every piece of gear meant something. Even leveling felt like an accomplishment. It wasn't convenient, especially the way I did it. It wasn't optimized, but it felt real. Classic didn't just bring back WoW to me, it reminded me what was missing. See, I started Classic as a warrior with my best friend who was a mage, and that was our combo going through, but due to lifestyle change or differences of lifestyle, we weren't able to play at the same time often, so we kind of just went our own way. And I solo leveled a warrior 1 to 60, and man, was that a humbling experience, especially when I wasn't tanking. You know, I spent so many hours doing the warrior quest for like the Whirlwind Axe and Berserker stance, and you know, the funny thing is, I didn't even see remotely all of the content Classic had to offer. I never did any raids. I only did some of the 10-man dungeons. That was as far as I got. But you know what? I had such a ball doing it. I think one of the biggest problems Blizzard has nowadays is that they think everyone needs to see everything. But the problem with this logic is that by nature devalues the content that you want everyone to see. You know, I was reminded that raids used to have like a level of mystique to them. Like you had to really work to get into them. And once you were in, they just felt so much better. They felt so much cooler. It felt like more of an experience. And I'm not the only one who has this opinion. I mean, ever since LFR came out, it's been kind of a debated thing. I think people have settled at this point, but to this day, I don't think LFR needs to be in the game. I think it's very convenient now to get into a pug and actually raid. And I think getting rid of LFR would actually increase the value of raiding again. But I don't think that's a conversation Blizzard is even close to wanting to have, so I think unfortunately we have to live with it. But that was one thing I was reminded of, is that I didn't have to see all of the content to enjoy Classic. Classic was the most fun I had in WoW in such a long time, and I experienced a fraction of it. You know, the PvP was great. The PvP felt like it mattered. There was actual progression with PvP. I was reminded that Blizzard cared more about just raiding at one point. Crafting felt like its own progression. You know, it also just reminded me of the problem with modern MMOs in general. After Battle for Azeroth, my trust in Blizzard was already hanging by a thread, but I was still willing to give them another chance. Then they announced Shadowlands, and I'll be honest, I thought they were going for another Legion moment here. It felt like they were going back to something bigger, something more meaningful, exploring the afterlife, revisiting major lore characters. It had that same "this could be huge" energy, so I bought in again. And that's what makes this part sting the most, because Shadowlands wasn't just disappointing. It finally broke my love for this game. Almost immediately going into Shadowlands, something fell off. There were systems on top of systems on top of systems, currencies on top of currencies, and instead of feeling excited to log in, I felt overwhelmed. It felt like a job instead of a video game. Like, it wasn't like a "there's nothing to do" feeling. It felt like, why do I have to do all of this just to keep up? And leveling didn't feel the same. The world didn't feel connected to each other. I mean, each zone was connected via portals instead of like actual landmass, which made the game feel even more fragmented and less of an MMO. You know, for an expansion that was supposed to explore the afterlife, it felt smaller than ever. And the worst part, I just didn't care. Not about the story, not about the systems, not even about progressing my character, which is crazy to say considering how much this game used to mean to me. I came back for the final patch, hoping for some improvement, but also, I guess, just to get ready for Dragonflight, because I obviously wanted to try that. And that's when it really clicked for me. This wasn't just a bad expansion. This was the moment I stopped trusting Blizzard to make something I actually wanted to play, because the final patch of Shadowlands was also extremely disappointing. After Shadowlands and Blizzard's endless amount of controversy at the time concerning sexual harassment of employees and just having a terrible toxic workplace, which also hurt my trust in the company, to me, Dragonflight was very underwhelming. I gave it a shot at launch, and I did play it for quite a bit because they did strip the game down. It seemed like they were finally listening to player feedback and just trying to focus on making the game fun. But there was just something missing with Dragonflight. I'm thinking probably the theme was a bit lame to me. It felt like a very happy-go-lucky, no-risk story. And I don't know, I just wasn't into it as much. So, you know, I was on and off for Dragonflight. Definitely more off than on, I think. And then we got the announcement of a triple expansion story arc with the War Within, Midnight, and the Lost Titan. And that kind of piqued my interest. I gave War Within a shot. I probably played this expansion the most compared to like Shadowlands and Dragonflight. I was a bit interested, but you know, after probably the first patch, I dropped it again. I only lasted about a patch. Just because, again, the story here just isn't interesting to me. The villain, Zalatoth, she's not really convincing to me. I know they want her to be the next big bad of this trilogy, but she just doesn't give that energy to me. And overall, the game just doesn't feel like World of Warcraft anymore. And Midnight is the first expansion that I'm not getting on launch because I don't know. I just can't be bothered. Maybe I'll get it on sale eventually to try it out for a patch or two, but yeah, this is kind of it for WoW for me. I think Shadowlands really was that tipping point where I just stopped giving a crap. And it's a shame because I used to really love this game, but After every expansion, they promise that they're listening to player feedback on what works, and it just takes them so long to adapt. And I don't know, it feels like they're still not listening, especially with the massive positive feedback that Classic WoW got. They should have learned from that and maybe simplified the game a little bit, but also maybe go in depth with more features that they've been ignoring, like crafting, PvP, and just other avenues outside of raiding and raid progression. And that leads me to one of my problems with modern MMOs to begin with, and not just World of Warcraft. The problem isn't just greed. It's that modern MMORPGs, including WoW, aren't designed the same way anymore. They're built around retention, daily checklist, and endgame efficiency, not community, not immersion, and certainly not the journey. Even now with newer expansions and like, you know, Midnight already out, which I didn't even realize it came out, WoW isn't necessarily bad. I mean, in some ways it's better than it's been in years, but it still doesn't feel like WoW to me, at least the version that I grew up with. And I think the biggest issue is actually pretty simple. There's no meaningful space for casual players anymore. Everything leads back into raiding, and if you're not doing that, what are you working towards? Older MMOs gave you so many different paths: PvP, crafting, exploration. And one of the biggest examples of this is old school RuneScape, which arguably is probably more popular than World of Warcraft at this point. I mean, I haven't really looked at Twitch numbers and like who's streaming OSRS versus who's streaming Midnight. But I gotta assume old school RuneScape probably carries a higher average of viewers. Because old school RuneScape, it lets you do whatever you want. And I get it, it's a different style of MMO than WoW was ever trying to be. Old school RuneScape is a total sandbox. You're free to do whatever you want. Any path you choose to go down is rewarding in some way, and there's some progression tied to it. You know, it's not you're gearing up to be like a raider or hardcore PvPer. You could be a chef and do endgame cooking stuff. You could be a fisherman and do endgame fisherman stuff. You could be an agility court master. You could be a thief. I get that WoW is a completely different animal to RuneScape, and I'm not saying WoW needs to adapt the exact same systems as old school RuneScape. I think they should consider, though, adding, or maybe, you know, paying attention to things like the crafting system in WoW. Sure, they've overhauled it a few times here and there over the past couple decades, but it's never felt like it's never felt like something that I should be progressing in. And it's always been like super boring. It's just really interacting with menus. They needed, I don't know, I think maybe adding quest to crafting could be cool. And like, why not bring back the PvP areas like Wintergrasp, Ashran, TB from Cataclysm? You know, these massive PvP zones that we just don't see anymore. They were such a fun optional thing to do. And like the ability to get PvP gear that actually kind of worked okay in PvE situations. You know, it's just, I'm tired of like progression leading me towards Mythic Plus dungeons, which I think are one of the worst, laziest content Blizzard's ever designed. That might be an unpopular opinion, but to me, the whole idea of Mythic Plus dungeons are just insanely lazy. Maybe I'm old man yelling at the clouds, but I liked when there was just normal and heroic dungeons. Same with raiding. I think there's too many raid difficulties, but that's a different conversation. But at this point, I guess I've just kind of accepted it. You know, there's a reason that MMOs want your retention, because the MMOs cost a lot of money to run, especially ones that look as good as WoW does. You know, these companies, especially now that Blizzard's owned by Microsoft, they want to get as much money out of that buyout as they can. And I understand it. I'm sad about it, but I understand it. And I think largely this is why you're not going to see MMOs ever really make a massive comeback. They're too expensive to run, especially looking at the recent Ashes of Creation implosion. You know, I think this was just a time in gaming that we're not going to capture again. But it hurts a little bit, but also at the same time, we got other great games that are coming out at this point. It feels like we're in the middle of like a first-person shooter renaissance and like a first-person, third-person RPG single-player renaissance that I'm happy to just kind of go with the flow. You know, we got games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, recently Crimson Desert, Cyberpunk, all of these great RPGs that are pushing the boundaries of what video games can be. That's where we are right now. And I guess that's just the nature of where we are in gaming currently. So I guess all we can really do is be happy with the memories that we have from MMOs, but again, I wouldn't harp too much about trying to get the next big thing, because I just simply think that's not going to be a thing. And also, I think a lot of our good memories with WoW and maybe old school RuneScape are what we crave, and not like the actual game systems itself. I think a big part of why we loved this genre was more the people we played with and not really the game itself. Although I do think there's, you know, I think it's maybe 50-50, the people and the game, but yeah. I don't know. I'm happy for the memories, and I am eternally thankful for World of Warcraft existing when it did.
The noble humans of Stormwind are a proud, tenacious race. Though the recent invasion of the demonic Burning Legion decimated their sister kingdom of Lordaeron, the defenders of Stormwind stand vigilant against any who would threaten the sanctity of their lands. Nestled in the foothills of Elwyn Forest, Stormwind City is one of the last bastions of human power in the world. Ruled by the Child King Anduin Wrynn, the people of Stormwind remain steadfast in their commitment to Randomite.
What a video. This was really fun to edit and put together. This took a lot of work, but I'm proud of it. Man, World of Warcraft, and just when MMOs were just really big in general, what a time to be alive and what a time to be a gamer. Let me know, what MMO did you play? Do you play Midnight? Is Midnight good? Is it worth getting back into? Did you have similar experiences to me? Let me know, and I'm looking forward to seeing comments here. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I got plenty more videos like this coming eventually. I just got to figure out my next one. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.